It's September 18th, 2023, and these are your headlines. The impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton may be over, but for members of the state legislature, and particularly in the House of Representatives, the fallout is just beginning. As you have probably seen by now, over the weekend, the Texas Senate acquitted Paxton on all impeachment charges brought to him by the House. They needed a 2/3 vote to do so. They could not even get a majority in the Senate. A majority of senators rejected those impeachment charges. Compare that to the Texas House, where the impeachment resolution passed by a vote of 121 to 23 back in May. It's not difficult to figure out that there's a major disconnect between the two chambers right now. You have the Senate, which overwhelmingly rejected the impeachment. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who presided over the trial immediately after the verdict, blasted the House for the way they mishandled the entire process, from lack of evidence to rushing through it with no notice, etc. He's even calling for a constitutional amendment to put in place protections to make sure that future impeachments are never done the way the House has handled this one again. And he says he will not let the House off the hook for it. Even today, Patrick requested a full audit of the costs to taxpayers incurred by the trial, expected to be millions of dollars. And then you have the Texas House, siding with Democrats and attempting to overturn Paxton's election. Literally, House Speaker Dade Phelan put out a statement accusing the senators who voted for the acquittal of caring only about politics and standing up for corruption. Who's standing with Dade? Well, it's been pretty quiet since Saturday's decision. State Representative Andrew Murr, a Republican, held a press conference where he stood side by side with Democrat State Representative Ann Johnson, who blasted Republicans and called Paxton's acquittal, quote, one of the darkest days in Texas. Another state representative, Jared Patterson, put out a typo-ridden statement Sunday night where he echoed those sentiments and said political courage was in short supply. Of course, to that I'd say political courage is in short supply, and it was on full display as 60 House Republicans followed Dade Phelan off a cliff and supporting what can only be accurately called a sham impeachment at this point. But besides Phelan, Patterson, and Murr, there appears to be very little being said right now by those who supported the impeachment. State Representative Mano Diala, who voted to impeach Paxton in May, did put out a statement shortly after the vote where he said Paxton deserves our full support and he's excited for Paxton to get back to work. I'm sure that had nothing to do with the fact that he just received a Republican primary opponent last week that has criticized him on this very issue. The general silence could be signaling a potential schism among Republican House members. After all, it's often said that one of the Speaker's unwritten responsibilities is to protect the members. In this case, 60 Republicans have just been made very vulnerable, in large part due to Phelan's actions. Vulnerable not just by Republican voters, who have been incredibly vocal on this issue, but to Ken Paxton and Dan Patrick in the Senate as well. At a time when now the legislature will soon pivot to a special session on education and school choice, it raises the question whether it will be Phelan that ends up holding the gavel during that special session. Already you have several state lawmakers calling for his resignation, people like Brian Harrison, Tony Tinderholt, Steve Toth, along with former President Donald Trump. One thing is for certain, the House right now is feeling the pressure from grassroots, and that means it's time to get even louder. Speaking of Representative Andrew Murr, he's continuing to receive heat from voters in his district as he's been censured by another county in his House district for opposing the core principles of the Republican Party. Murr represents House District 53, an area northwest of San Antonio that includes the counties of Bandera, Crane, Crockett, Edwards, Kerr, Kimball, Llano, Mason, McCulloch, Medina, Menard, Pecos, Real, Schleicher, Sutton, and Upton. The Medina County GOP has censured Murr for his role in the rushed impeachment process, as well as for his vote for House Speaker Dade Phelan, who of course appointed Democrats to key committee chairmanships in the Texas House. They've also highlighted his votes against school choice and for state interference in the political party process. Murr has also been censured by the Bandera County GOP and formally admonished by the Real County GOP. Expect more of these resolutions for all kinds of members in the coming weeks and months ahead. Lastly, a former secretary for the assistant principal at a high school in South Texas was arrested Friday for allegedly performing sexual acts on a student. Samantha Lee Carranza, who worked at Sherryland High School in Mission, Texas, was arrested on charges of sexual assault of a child and improper relationship between an educator and a student. According to a probable cause affidavit reported by KRGV News, a 16-year-old student, identified under the pseudonym Chris, reported sexual assault by a school employee to Mission Police Department on September 1st. The student told the Mission PD that on August 31st, he went to the assistant principal's office to borrow a cell phone charger. The principal's secretary allowed him to use the charger, but said he had to stay near her desk. Carranza then sparked a conversation about her family, current divorce. Chris claims she showed him a photo of her breasts, making him uncomfortable. When he attempted to leave, he reported that Carranza stopped him. The story goes on from there. The details are very sad. This is, of course, just one of the latest stories of so-called bad apples in Texas's government schools. Many of these stories have also been covered in the latest season of our podcast series, Exposed: The Dark Side of Texas Schools, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts. And it's stories like these that continue to fuel the push for serious reform as the legislature faces a special session on education in the weeks ahead. To get more news of the day, head to texasscorecard.com or follow me on X at @BWaltons.
No ads, no paywalls, no government grants, and no corporate masters. Just real news for real Texans. This is Texas Scorecard.